Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Wellness Academy podcast. I'm Dan Ball, I'm the host, and on our show here at the Wellness Academy, it is my job to distill all things wellness and attempt to break down from all our different coaches, experts, and guests their wisdom and knowledge so you can apply it to your own life. My guest today is Mike Catris. Mike is currently most well known for being responsible for the athlete program programming. The athlete program is an online program for CrossFitters and athletes around the world, and they currently have nearly a dozen different athletes qualified for the CrossFit Games through their programming. Mike was a super cool guy. I had the pleasure of meeting him recently, courtesy of one of our previous guests, Kelly Baker. A super cool dude to talk to, very, very interesting, very intelligent, and a broad range of topics covered, which I think will be interesting for everybody to listen to. On today's episode, we also have a very special sponsor. At the Wellness Academy, we are part podcast and also part event host, part coach, part online coach, part nutritional advice, part life advice, etc., etc. And our first exclusive retreat is being launched January the 31st and February the 1st, 2020 at Cotswold House in Chipping Campden in the Cotswolds. For more information, please head to our Instagram account at Wellness Academy Social or at Cotswold House Hotel, or head to them on email and telephone. The details will be in the bottom of this podcast in the notes. The event is going to be a fantastic exclusive retreat across 2 days in the wonderful Cotswolds at Cotswold House Hotel. Without dragging this promo out too far, please check out more info with us, and hopefully we will see you guys in person, me included, at Cotswold House on January the 31st. I'm excited to bring you this interview with Mike. Let me know what you think. Subscribe, like, share, do the usual things to help support the show, and we will see you guys on the next one. So, Mike, welcome to the Wellness Academy podcast. Thank you very, very much for taking time out to do this. As we've just said, jet lag is not your friend at the moment. You've just got back from China, I think. Yeah. So I appreciate the effort. Thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having me, mate. It's a pleasure and a privilege.
Good man. I didn't want to start with your current exploits recently at the two most recent CrossFit sanctioned competitions. I thought we'd sort of start with a bit of a bio, because I had the pleasure of meeting you at an athlete program training day when I came over to meet in person one of our other guests, Kelly. And I had the absolute pleasure of listening to you talk. Like, the phrase dropping knowledge bombs was very applicable to listening to you for probably 3 of the hours while we were there.
Yeah, probably felt like longer when I was talking, I'd imagine.
But I remember you talking about lots of little different things that you've done. So people you'd worked with, people you'd consulted for, and I was like, I have to ask him about that when I get the chance. So give us a bit of a biography of what got you to where you are now and what your passions are and so on and so forth.
Oh God, okay. So I guess first and foremost, I was a rugby player. That's how I sort of started as an athlete, if that's what you want to call me. That was my sort of my first real pleasure, sort of passion. I played everything as a kid growing up. Like, I just loved sport. I loved training, loved phys. But rugby and boxing were my two sort of my two best sports, if you like, my two sort of real passions. I played both, or I represented my country at both at younger age groups and all the way through. And when I was about 16, 17, they had a weird rule that they had in Cardiff that you could only represent the city in one sport, because they wanted to push you towards doing one better than the other, sort of thing. Kind of the opposite to CrossFit. And I suppose they were quite conflicting. I had to sort of stay at a certain weight or maintain weight for boxing, and I was on the small side for rugby, so I had to, if I was going to do one or the other, it wasn't going to be, they weren't going to sort of go hand in hand. So I decided to go with rugby. and went on to play sort of semi-professional, edge of professional rugby. So I hesitate to call myself a professional rugby player, though I was getting paid. I didn't play enough really to consider myself a proper professional.
Okay.
But I played a decent level and did that for a couple of years until I was 24. I had a clash of heads and a double eye socket fracture, which was my third or fourth concussion of that season. Back then it wasn't as big a deal. They didn't have all the protocols and all the other stuff, but I had a couple of decent ones.
But it's a big deal for a human being, even if it's not.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like all of the stuff that's coming out about it now, sort of makes a lot more sense really why I'm as messed up as I am. But yeah, I mean, back then it wasn't anywhere near as professional in terms of our approach to that side of things. It was kind of like, how many fingers am I holding up? What's the score? How do you feel? Yeah, okay, you're all right. Carry on playing, or yeah, and it was a bit like that really. So I had a couple of those and a couple of bad. Well, the last one was a bad one, but again, I got up, carried on playing, played 80 minutes with a double eye socket fracture, and the next day I looked like Quasimodo. So I went to the doctors, and they were like, "Yeah, I think it's about time you packed it in." The neurologist sort of signed me off, and that was kind of what I wanted to do, what I always wanted to do, and I just kind of felt a little bit lost for a second or two, and I was training in a CrossFit gym at the time, but not doing CrossFit, and decided that looks like a bit of fun. I was told I couldn't lift anything heavy for a couple of months anyway because of the pressure behind my eyes. So I was like, well, they don't lift anything heavy. For me, it wasn't at the time. I was a bit bigger, a bit stronger then. So I'll just jump in on that and see how it is, and just fell in love with it and never looked back really. So that sort of put me into the realm of CrossFit and everything else. Alongside all of that, I've got a couple of degrees and diplomas in bits and bobs. So I got my own sports nutrition company. And I've done, personal training and coaching for a long time for pocket money alongside that side of things. And worked with some pretty cool people on the nutrition side of things, and worked for some pretty cool companies as well. And it kind of all sort of merged together when I got my insurance payout for rugby. I put that into, I had my own brand at the time, but developing that further and pushing things forward, and created Kratos RX, which took over from Kratos Nutrition, and tried to sort of develop a brand that was specific to the sport that I was involved in, which was CrossFit.
So the nutrition thing was one of the first things I remember you saying, as well as the supplement stuff. So what kind of companies is it that you'd worked with? That, because I can't remember who you said, and I sort of wanted therefore you to say rather than me fumble through my recollections from a couple of months ago.
Yeah, so I basically stumbled upon a situation where I went to Body Power. God, it must have been 2012 or maybe 2013, something like that, back when it was a real thing and not just a cattle market. When we, people like Lane Norton and God, there was tons of people, but like well-respected nutritionists and everything were talking, and I had a small stage to do a little bit of a presentation talking about supplementation, and I got sort of kind of headhunted a little bit by a company called Glambia, which is one of the biggest nutrition developers as a not a wholesaler. What's the word I'm looking for? As a product manufacturer. At the time, they owned MyProtein. They owned Optimum Nutrition, BSN. They bought out a year or two after. So some pretty big brands, but they also product manufactured for a lot of companies like Progenics and companies like that. And I was like a freelance formulation. I don't want to say it, but sort of expert, I guess. They sort of they had a handful of us that were scattered about, and whenever they had products that they were developing that weren't quite working, we came in and helped them out with trying to fix the problems that they had and developing some products. And every now and again they'd give us some stuff where they'd say, oh, look, we're looking for a product that does X, Y, and Z. Can you help us, or can you develop something? And yeah, it was kind of like a freelance gig. You never really knew where the products you were developing went and who they sold to. However long later, but I'm not 100% sure I'm allowed to say what products I developed for
Yeah,
who.
of course. Yeah. What does, but like, out of curiosity, like, what does not working mean? So I think you talked at the athlete program training day from like a flavor perspective. So you would discuss.
Yeah, there's a couple of different things. Yeah. So it can be flavor. It could be, we've got this product that is doing, it's doing what it says on the tin. It's call it a pre-workout. Okay. Yeah. We're getting the energy. We're getting the cognitive side of things. We're getting all of the good stuff that we want from this product, but it's not going to sell because the flavor doesn't work. It tastes like shit. Okay. So we need to look at different flavoring systems. We need to try and figure out how we can potentially reduce acidity, how we can reduce, certain ingredients that you have in these things have a natural flavor to them anyway. So whey is easy because it's a nice, naturally sweet sort of ingredient.
Yeah.
But things like theanine, things like acetylcarnitine, things like beta-alanine don't taste good, and they play around with the pH levels of whatever you're putting together. And certain things can taste absolutely fine on their own, but when they react with other chemicals can cause a little bit of a shitstorm in terms of flavors as well. So it wasn't all flavoring. There was a guy called Sean who was better than me on the flavoring side of things. I was more making things work in terms of getting the desired effect of the product itself. And we often work together. Sean went on to work for one of the biggest nutrition companies that's still going in the UK at the moment. So he's a very clever, very well-respected guy. And we still talk to this day. But he was more the flavor side of things. I was more the working side of things, and we worked quite well together. So we just got shipped in every now and again when they needed a bit of help with things. They had their own R&D department, obviously, who were fine and did some great products. It was just every now and again they got stuck. So
sounds like a really, really, you'd have to be quite intelligent to do this. Like,
I don't think
you definitely, like, you do come across like a smart dude. Like, I think quite analytical from the time I've spoken to you. Very kind of step by step, which I imagine would work. Like going, okay, that chemical plus that chemical might not be working. Let's test that out first. But it still seems like that would require quite a lot of, almost in your own mind, project management, like to separate those things out. Like, where did that come from? Is that because you've done your degrees and your diplomas, or?
Yeah, I guess so. I think you definitely need to have an organized mind for something like that, because it's effectively fault finding. If you like, you're looking at something, and these guys that put these things together are bright guys. They're not just sort of lab monkeys that are chucking things together and seeing what sticks. So if they're not figuring it out, then there's it's nothing obvious. So you need to logically break things down and start from the beginning basically and say, okay, I've got 1 + 2 here and it's not equaling 3 and I need to figure out why. So I guess, I like problem solving. That's why I enjoy programming. That's why I enjoy coaching, is because, if you're not strong and you need to get strong, and simple things like 5x5 isn't working for you, I like figuring out how we get to that situation. So I guess there's something to do with that. And certainly, qualifications and all that other stuff have helped along the way. You can't go in there blind and not have that underpinning knowledge. But I think in reality, from a sports nutrition, certainly from a supplementation side of things, it's a lot of experience and a lot of trial and error. Because actually, if you do pharmacology or that side of things, from a supplementation point of view, by the time you finish your degree, it's moved on exponentially already anyway. It's such a relatively new field, and apart from the basic stuff that we've been dealing with for years and years, things like creatine monohydrate, whey, and the other stuff, there's always something new on the horizon, and you're pretty much learning as you go with that. So it is a bit of just trial and error and learning as you go, and having a pretty good memory, I guess. Like, oh yeah, I've tried that before, that didn't work quite well, and that would make sense that wouldn't work with this compound, so it might not work with this compound.
And obviously you talk about things changing quickly. I reckon when you were in that at your peak as such, pea protein, quinoa protein, soy protein, etc., like they weren't a thing like they are now.
Not so much. We worked with pea a little bit, and we worked with soy a little bit. But
And there's
certainly,
hemp as well as another one, isn't it?
yes, we didn't do a lot with brown rice. We didn't do a lot with hemp. We didn't do a lot with, certainly didn't do anything with quinoa. And these sort of things that have certainly become a lot more in vogue now with the rise of veganism and plant-based diets and all that other stuff. So yeah, that was all certainly in back in those days when I was, like you're right to say, at my peak in that industry, was not really a thing.
I'm just thinking like flavor. Like I've tried, even the guys that say that organic, and that might be not the right word, but organic proteins that are outside of whey, they say they taste nice, and then you try them and you're like, no.
So pea protein does not taste good as a raw ingredient. It's the texture's not great either. It's a gritty substance. But it's the same with certain types of whey as well. Like you can put things through processes, hydrolyzation, isolation, whatever, that can improve consistency. But the underlying taste of something is the underlying taste of it. You can mask that, and you can break that down further, but you're only breaking down something that doesn't taste great into something that tastes a little bit better than something that doesn't taste great, you know?
Have you paid much attention to the Game Changers thing?
How much do you want me to piss people off?
Well, no, because what I find super interesting about it, so I didn't watch it when it came out, because one, I heard the whole what's his name now? James Cameron owns a pea protein company. I tried the vegan thing for a while after I watched Cowspiracy, and then before I watched the actual film, I watched a Joe Rogan podcast where he had a guy on debunking the film, to which I've then since forced myself to persevere through the bloody rebuttal debate podcast with what's his name now? James Wilkes.
Yeah, okay.
Which is the MMA athlete that's in the film. Mm-hmm. And Chris Kresser didn't come out looking great at the end of that podcast, unfortunately for him. But I think they only really dealt with two issues throughout a 4-hour podcast. The rest of it was just pedantic bickering and so on and so forth, in my opinion. And I was just curious from a guy that's worked in the supplement and nutrition industry for a long time, that's, had a different viewpoint on it compared to the general public. I just thought I'd get your broad overall opinion. We could probably do an entire podcast on it and then have everyone hate us because we make a few half-arsed statements that aren't just our opinion. You know what I mean? It's so difficult. I just thought I'd see what you thought.
I think the problem that you've got with, in general, when you look at these, I'm going to say documentaries with the little fingers, because they're entertainment.
It's a film. Yeah,
it's a film. And the problem that you've got is that it's similar when we used to work on studies. If I was going to turn around to a research company and say, hey, look, I want to do this study. I need some funding for this study to turn around and tell everybody how good for you broccoli is. They're going to go, everyone knows broccoli is good for you, and that's not going to sell. Like, that's not going to get published, or it's not going to draw bums on seats. It's not a big deal. So you don't get the funding. You don't get to do the research. Okay. If I turn around and said, okay, I want to turn around and say that eating a kebab once a week and drinking 3 beers a week is actually beneficial for muscle growth, somebody like Men's Health, they're going to go, right, here's a couple of grand, go and get that study done, because that's going to seriously sell magazines. That's going to get people, it's going to draw people across, because it's controversial for starters, but also because it's completely against the grain of what the normal sort of average people think. And when you look at these documentaries or films, they're doing the same thing. They're trying to draw people in with an argument that is one-sided, and they're in order to try and prove their argument, they're going into every nook and cranny with massive confirmation bias, and they're going in. It's almost like you start Googling something. If you start Googling, why is the vegan diet good for you? Then you're going to come up with a load of things telling you how good the vegan diet is.
Yeah.
Okay, you've already got confirmation bias because you're searching for good
Well, you
things.
phrased your question as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And vice versa. Why is the vegan diet bad for you? Automatically, all the other stuff comes to you. The problem that I've got with these films, and I have sat through them. Don't watch What the Health if you don't want to watch a film that is like literally. I felt like I was jabbing spanners in my eyes for the whole thing, and I was just like, I can't watch this. They brought Steve-O from Jackass on as an expert on nutrition because everyone knows that knows exactly what he's talking about in the nutrition side of things. The guy was
I heard that he had a PhD in nutrition.
yeah, the guy literally got paid to make a tit out of himself on telly, and now he's going to be one of the people you put forward to, like, yeah, see, veganism is great. It's like I just couldn't get my head around it. But the problem with these documentaries, like I said, is just they go in there with massive confirmation bias, and they're so one-sided that actually the little bits of science that are pro plant-based diet, and there's plenty of evidence out there that they can use that is pro for a plant-based diet, but there's just swarming it with so much shit around it that it actually just completely alienates the film itself.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take the real science seriously because there's so much shit in there as well, and it just kind of it just makes me think, God, why can't somebody just come up with something genuinely objective and say, hey, here are the pros, here are the cons, because there are cons as well, and here's the reality of the situation, and give somebody a broad picture.
Make
It's
your
like,
decision.
it's like, okay, here's my argument, and this is the only thing that I'm going to put forward, or here's my argument, this is the only thing I'm going to put forward. But the reality is, it's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I just find it frustrating. I find it hard to watch because they pluck individual studies that are completely poorly done and have real poor carryover to general like health and well-being because it proves their point, and it's just making them come across as.
Well, this was kind of one of the things that was on this Game Changers debate on the Joe Rogan podcast last week, was that James Wilkes obviously did the film. Chris Kresser had time to sit and debunk the film. And it sounds like he unfortunately did make some statements that were untrue, because James Wilkes was able to very, very, very effectively prove some of the stuff that he said on the podcast the previous week wrong. It was just sort of the way that he went about doing it. It's like, imagine
like a character assassination, yeah, I guess.
It's like, he definitely did that, yeah. And it's like, let's say me and you are friends, and you ask me to do something for you. I do something wrong, and you're like, Danny, like, you did that wrong, right? And I go, yeah, look, hands up, man, I'm sorry. But then you proceed for the rest of the day to keep reminding me that I did something wrong. How long before I just turn around and say, sod off, and I want to smack you in the face because you keep reminding me that I was wrong? It was like that on this podcast. But like, he was of the opinion that Chris Kresser had cherry-picked studies to prove his point, contradicted Chris Kresser to try and prove Chris Kresser wrong by cherry-picking one recent study. And my limited understanding, and I definitely limited understanding, but you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. A study only really carries weight when one person has done it, and then another person is able to reproduce it with the same results, and another person is able to reproduce it with the same results.
Absolutely, yeah. In terms of a scientific approach, if it's not repeatable, then it's not effective.
And so James Wilkes sits there and goes, "You're wrong because of this study that was done last year." And it's not been reproduced. I just sat at that. I had 25 minutes left and I turned it off, but I had to force myself through it. Just because I was really looking for what were some actionable truths for me as an individual. Do you know what I mean? Like, should I be eating more protein from plant-based sources and eliminating some meat? Am I completely okay to leave meat in my diet as I do? Am I blah, blah, blah? And you've got some real world examples, I understand, from, again, previous conversations together, in that some of the best CrossFit athletes that you train are now plant-based, right?
Yeah. I've got some of my athletes are plant-based. I know some athletes that I don't coach, but I helped with nutritionally, have gone plant-based and have since come back away, not from being plant-based. Like, for me, this is the big thing, okay? I would consider myself plant-based because I eat 11 or 12 portions of fruit and veg a day, but I eat meat.
That is plant-based. Yeah, and
this is the issue that I've got, right, is that for the vast majority of these sort of propaganda films, they seem to have, okay, plant-based is fully plant-based and nothing else, and here are all the benefits. And the only other thing than being plant-based is being a carnivore that eats poorly produced processed meats.
Goes to McDonald's, eats, yeah.
It's like, okay, if you're not plant-based, then you're basically eating bacon and salami. That's the comparison.
They've been watching me day to day. That's what it is.
Yeah, and it's like you can get all the benefits of being a plant-based person, predominantly plant-based, and still get the benefits of animal protein. And that's that's the elephant in the room that people seem to be completely neglecting and ignoring. And that's the thing that annoys me the most, is that, okay, so because I'm not vegan, I don't get the benefits of fruit and vegetables.
Yeah.
Science.
And I should point out, just you've got a great audience that hopefully you'll be able to get to listen to this chat together. And I can envision one of the points that people will make. I'd like to point out that when we sat on the athlete program training day, you said to us all that were there, if you're vegan for moral reasons, I, as your coach and nutritionist, will work around that and we'll do our very best to make 100%. Sure that, do you know what I mean? Like, you're not there to go, oh, you're vegan for moral reasons, and judge you and laugh at you about it. We're not here to do that. This is from a nutritional, I'm a human being, what's best for me perspective.
100%. And I think, I've had some really good debates. I've got members of my gym who are doctors that are vegan, okay? And they're bright, intelligent people, and very, very proactively, I call them stabby vegans. They're the ones that proactively put stuff out there. I call them stabby vegans because they'd happily stab somebody that's not vegan, but they won't stab a cow. But it's like, and my argument is always, if you are, the only real argument that I see personally from a performance point of view, now that's a big thing as well, is from a performance point of view, the only reason that you have to go vegan is ethics. From a health and well-being point of view, and considering no performance considerations whatsoever, you can be vegan and be healthy, and it can be a lot healthier than an omnivorous diet if an omnivorous diet is done poorly. From a performance point of view, I've yet to see it in practice like this, and this is the other thing where something like the Game Changers, the only way that you can tell me that these people are the best because they are plant-based is if they went off and then went on an omnivorous diet and did the exact same training and went up against the exact same people and didn't beat them, or didn't beat them by the same margins that they beat them when they were plant-based. It's an impossible thing to compare. Like, to turn around and say that Nate Diaz only beat Conor McGregor because he was plant-based, the automatic response for me is, what about the other 95% of MMA champions who eat meat? Does that mean that just because you can, does that mean you should, in terms of a performance point of view? Now, you turn around to me and say, okay, ethically, I want to be vegan. Cool. Like, I'm 100% in on that. If it does not sit with your morals and you don't want to eat meat, 100%, and I will work around that with you and try and help you as much as you can to perform as best as you can. But I will tell you that it's likely, from my experience, that your performance might not be optimal and your recovery may suffer. But I can't guarantee that.
Yeah, and I think that's another one of the points, isn't it? That I wish that they would have a podcast where someone who was a vegan and someone who was not, like experts in their field, sat down and went, okay, I'm a vegan, I believe that you should do A, B, and C. Okay, I'm an omnivore, I believe you should do D, E, and F. How can we sit and meet in the middle and turn around and say, okay, this is where the middle ground is? And that would be a really, really cool thing to listen to, like a collaborative effort. Rather than, if you're not a vegan, you're going. I mean, I remember sitting in a sauna once with somebody who was a Christian, and he actually sat and said to my face, "Yeah, you are going to hell because you don't believe in God." Yeah. Same dude did eventually sit in the same sauna and say to me, "Actually, I think they'll let you off because apparently he liked me by that point." But that's the challenging bit.
Yeah, I think and this is something I've not got in trouble with before, but just something I have said in the past, and I do agree with it, and I liken it. I liken food choices in terms of like veganism, vegetarianism, whatever it is, to a religion and sexuality. Like, I have got literally no problem at all with any religion or any type of sexuality. I've got no issue at all. What I would have an issue with is if somebody, for instance, was gay and they were trying to make other people gay because that's what they wanted and not what the person who didn't want to be gay was. That's not okay. And it's the same as somebody who is Christian trying to make other people Christian because that's what they want to happen, not because the people want that to happen. It's like, that is your choice, and that is no problem whatsoever. You crack on and you do that the way that you want to do it. And it's the same with, I want to be vegan, absolutely no problem, especially, like I said, from an ethical point of view. But do not try and tell me that I need to be vegan and use poor science as your reasoning behind it.
From a food perspective, what you mentioned, of course, that you eat a lot of fruit and veg.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fruit and veg. That laughs in the face of 5 a day when you're eating, 12 portions or something. But stereotypically, CrossFitters have loved paleo, but you're not paleo.
No, I'm relatively clean. I eat oats and muesli, stuff like that, just because I need the calories. Like, it's a pretty the problem that I had. I've done paleo, and I quite like paleo from a generic, like, general health point of view, similar to what you'll see when people, if they go on a plant-based diet that are in an unhealthy spiral and not eating well. They will see benefits from going on a vegan diet because they are actually eating more fruit, veg, micronutrients, and all the goods, assuming that they're not just eating microwave vegan meals, which I have seen as well. And the same thing with paleo is you're basically cutting out shit to a big degree. So if you're somebody that's eating a lot of crap and you cut out a lot of crap, you're going to see a benefit to it, assuming that you're getting enough protein and enough calories and everything else as well. So I've got no problem with that. It's just a hard thing. I'm on over 4,000 calories a day. It's a tough thing to get that in broccoli.
Have you lost weight since we were at the athlete program training day? Like, have you lost some body fat wise, obviously, not muscle wise?
No, I think I've probably competed 3 weekends on the bounce. I've literally just got back from China yesterday. I think I'm probably about maybe 2 kilos down. I sit anywhere between 88 and 92 kilos all the time. So it just depends where I'm at there. I'm probably 88 and a half, 89 kilos at the moment. But given a day or two of just normal eating and stuff, I'll probably be in and around the 90 kilo mark.
So the transition to then becoming the dude behind the athlete program training, not the dude behind athlete program, because of course that's Carl. I know that anybody watching will probably know who Scott Panchik is, and he was the biggest guy.
Yeah.
Carl obviously made the decision to then speak to you. What, from an outside perspective looking in, and don't get me wrong, I know just because Scott Panchik is a good CrossFitter, it don't mean that he's good at programming for CrossFitters. Assuming he is, but it's not because he finished. He finished top 10 again last year, didn't he? He made it to the final.
Yeah, I think he finished 4th, I think.
For like the umpteenth time.
Yeah.
He's clearly a ledge in CrossFit, but so, like, from an outside perspective looking in, I'm going, well, Scott Panchik was a name I knew. Mike Catris isn't a name I knew. But Carl's a smart guy, values his business and his program incredibly well. He chose you over Scott. I'm not going to discuss Scott. I want to discuss you. Like, where were the credentials? Like, what was it that you felt that you'd done that made him go, let's speak to Mike?
I was definitely cheaper. No, I honestly think I think things, as far as I know, were going fine with Scott. I think that he had his own programming company as well over in the States, and it was almost a little bit of a conflict because he was doing both. And and it just didn't, for whatever reason, it wasn't working. And Carl tried to go in-house with the guys that he had at CrossFit Colchester, with himself and a couple of other guys, and tried to sort of build the program themselves, and started seeing a little bit of a drop-off in terms of the quality that was being produced, and also I think in terms of the numbers that were on the program and stuff like that. But back in 2015, I won the Battle of the Beasts, it was then, now the European Championships, which was Carl's event. I've always done my own programming. I've always had, and I've always programmed for a handful of others. Okay. And in that competition in 2015 and again in 2016, I had a real small stable of athletes. I had like maybe 10 athletes that I was looking after. And I remember we went to 2016, and I had 8 athletes there, and all 8 of us got to the semi-finals, and 4 of us got to the finals, and all this other stuff. And Carl sort of saw me coaching and warming up a couple of these guys, and he was like, "Oh, right, what's going on here?" I was like, "Oh, no, I coach all these guys." And he was like, "Right," and saw that they'd all done pretty well. And he's like, "Well, how many guys do you coach?" And I was like, "Well, this is pretty much it. Like, everyone you see here that's it." And I think I got 2 others that couldn't make it but both qualified or whatever. And he was kind of like, "Right, so you've got 10 athletes and all 10 of them are doing pretty well. That's not a bad ratio." And I was like, "Oh, they just do what I do on a day-to-day." And 2-3 years later, obviously this situation then happened with the athlete program. And for whatever reason, I think he must have remembered that and thought, I must know what I'm doing. And he gave me a call. And yeah, the rest is history. I just thought it was a good opportunity for me to, I never really marketed it or pushed it. It was just something that I did alongside, and something I enjoyed doing. And he gave me the opportunity to spread that net a little further and help more people, basically.
What characterizes a good coach, do you think, in your experience? So you had 10 people doing well. We'll touch on how many people you've had do well at, like, in terms of last year's CrossFit Open and the games, how that's improved this year with the CrossFit Open and the games, and so on. But like, what characterizes a good coach? What makes you a good coach? What do you put that success down to in terms of that which you've been able to control?
Honestly, I think you're always learning. I think if you think you know it and you know it all, you're fucked. Because certainly in the sport that we're in, it's ever changing. It's no surprise that every Open there's a new movement, and that's going to be the case for every year, forever and ever and ever. Amen, I'd imagine. So if that's the case, then the sport itself is always developing and always changing. So as a coach, I think you need to be willing and able to do that as well. And I think that personally, from a coaching point of view, I've always been a student of that. I've always enjoyed learning, and I've always liked talking to people that I think know what they're talking about. And I've always liked learning from other people as much as I can. I think you can have a conversation with literally anyone that is at any level in anything, and you can take something that you can learn from that conversation, even if that is just, I've learned not to talk to that person again. Whatever that might be. And I think I think that's a massively important part of it. And I guess that could be put across as humility, that you need to understand that you don't know it all, and you need to be willing to sometimes take a step back and make mistakes. Like, admit you make mistakes. I have made mistakes with athletes, with myself in programming, and I'm sure I will continue to do that. And as long as you understand that you've made a mistake and you learn from that, I think that's the most powerful thing you can do, like failing forward,
I also think there's definitely got to be an element of a strong self-image involved, because it could be easy to, like, they say that you should be the stupidest person in the room, don't they? Or like
not the cleverest person.
Not the cleverest person in the room. Once you're the cleverest person in the room, you need to find a new room.
Yeah.
But like, if you're not comfortable within yourself from a self-image, a self-esteem perspective, to take a step into that room and then be the stupidest person in that room can force you back to that previous room. So like, you've obviously got a good level of confidence and belief in your ability, but then at the same time, the eagerness to continually improve that.
Yeah, I guess so. I think I have, like I said, had, and I don't know anyone that hasn't, but I have had confidence issues with certain things in the past. And I think that, again, like every year that there's at points where you doubt yourself, have I done this right? You get to the Open every year. And like, for instance, this year, with this year, you're like, okay, well, last year I got these people helped get these people to games. They got themselves to the games. I just helped them. But you're like, shit, have I made them worse? Have I made them better? Like, you start worrying, and then you see the results coming in, and you're like, phew, I got away with it again. And there is a lot of that, and there's a lot of variables that go into it. But as long as you can be honest with yourself, and I think that's a big thing as well with coaching, is being honest with your athletes. Like, I hope that if you spoke to any of my athletes, that they would tell you I'm a pretty honest guy in terms of feedback. In terms of, if they ask me a question, I'll tell them the truth, even if it's not necessarily the most comfortable thing to talk about. And I'm like that with myself. And I'm my own worst critic. But I think you have to be. I think if this is the realm that you want to be in, that you need to be able to take it on the chin, and if nobody's willing to tell you, that you've got to tell yourself.
And you work. I feel like I remember you mentioning that you work with Sarah, Sigmund's daughter, or have done, or do still work with Sarah.
No, I don't work with Sarah. No, I've.
Oh no, it's okay. So that will have been that Sarah went plant-based. That will have been why she came up in the discussion then.
Yeah, so Sarah went plant-based.
You worked with.
I have done some stuff with Sam in the past, yeah. So I'm not currently helping Sam out. I think Sam will message me very rarely, but probably about 2 years ago, maybe, was the last time that I did some actual help with her in terms of macros and meal plans and all that other stuff. So, but yeah, I think that's just a cool thing. It's like,
it is cool. Yeah. From an outside looking in, because like, everybody loves Sam in this country. Who's a CrossFitter, and even beyond this country, she's a freaking legend. Like, everyone, like her running past Brent Fikowski at the games that year when they were at the ranch is one of the things I always remember about those documentary films.
Yeah.
So in terms of who did well this year, who's been the standout people up to this point in terms of the Open and qualification and so on and so forth? I seem to remember the email that came out. I'm on the athlete program email list, and there was a these guys did amazing. Who have you been most proud of?
Oh, that's like saying which kid you love the most.
I know, that's why I did it on purpose. Like, almost like, pick your favourite parent. Go on.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think there's been some awesome results. It's been great to see so many people qualifying. Like, I'll double check the numbers. I think the invites go out in 4 days or 5 days time, so that'll be the official line. So I don't know if there's still some adjustments and stuff to be made, but I think we've qualified 10 through to the games this year, which is just through the Open, which is fantastic.
Do you guys count Zach as one of them?
So Zach would be he's on the athlete program. I don't coach Zach. I have helped him with stuff in the past, but I don't coach him directly. But yeah, he's one of our guys. He's one of our coaches, so he coaches. And he's done phenomenally well. Ironically, I'm probably most proud of somebody that didn't qualify in terms of how well they did this year, which was Charlotte Spence.
I was actually just about to say to you, because I put my foot in it a little bit.
Right.
The email came out, and I'm like, cool. I know I've spoken to Kelly. I know I've spoken to Dan, who does athlete program. I know I came to the athlete program training day, met Mike, met Carl, had a great time. There might be some of the people on this list here that I've had on this email. So I sent out a few DMs on Instagram, and I messaged Charlotte. I thought she would be somebody that sounds really inspiring. She's a mum of 2, 3.
No, just one. She's got one.
Just one.
Yeah, Jake. Yeah.
So she's a mum. She's qualified. Like, she finished second in the entire country
by 1 point.
I might have messaged her saying congratulations on qualifying for the CrossFit Games.
Okay. But hey,
and had to say I'm really sorry. Like, but they're still amazing. Like, congratulations on an amazing performance. Thankfully, she was still willing to talk to me a little bit, and we're trying to organise her coming on the podcast rather than thinking, who is this guy making that colossal mistake?
No, I think like genuinely that's one of the reasons I'm as proud of her as she is, because she came to me pretty broken, lot of little niggles, a lot of little injuries, and lacking confidence as well, which is a shock for how good she actually is, and just sort of to give an idea of the sort of the humility and lack of almost self-esteem that she had at the time. It's like going into the Open, she was like, I really just don't want to embarrass myself. And she came second in the country. And that sort of sums her up. That's the reason that she's on my teams in sanctionals, is that she's just so much better than she thinks she is, but she's also absolutely nails. Like, you know, if I turn around to her and say, look, this is what we're going to do in training today, you're going to run through this brick wall. She's like, cool. What height am I hitting it and how fast do you want me to run? And like, I just love that. But it's been a real cool thing for her to improve as much as she has when she was already really good when I started working with her, for starters, but also the fact that a couple of things that were not big weaknesses, but were weaknesses, are now becoming strengths. And I think it's a really cool lesson for anybody at any stage in their training career, that it doesn't matter how old people think you are, how, you know, at what level you're already at, you can still get better. And especially when she's a full-time PTI in the army, she's a mum, she's married, she's 32 years old, you know, she doesn't train as much volume as some of my other guys, because she can't fit that amount of work in, and she's still getting better. So I was incredibly proud of how well she did. But that is just one of umpteen guys that have done so well. You know, I've got a list of, I'm working with 26 athletes at the moment, and 9 of those guys have qualified for the games, and I think 3 or maybe 4 of them finished second in their country, as well.
Do you work with, is it a lady, she's another one that was on that list on the email, is it Dina Swift?
Yeah, I work with Dina, who made it to the games last year through South Africa. She's a phenomenal athlete as well, and another person that has come on leaps and bounds this year, but actually didn't make it because Tammy Robinson, who is a Kiwi but now has a South African passport, has taken that spot, and she's a legit athlete. I mean, she's been to the games before with CrossFit Yaz, and she's a great athlete. And I think you dad, I think, is South African, and we met her out at the games last year and spoke to her, and she was, because she was training in the same place as us when we were warming up and building up towards the games itself, and she said, oh, you know, I'm looking to get my South African passport, and I was like, that's cool. That's tough pill for Dina to swallow, but do you know what? Her attitude and her development is so cool, because she's not defined by that. Like, she is not, I'm Dina Swift, the CrossFit Games athlete. I'm Dina Swift, and I'm just trying to be the best Dina Swift I can be. And I think that's
like a cool chick, like from
absolute legend. Really cool.
Very quirky and very funny. Her Instagram,
she is funny.
Her Instagram stories make me chuckle every day whenever I see something. So you've now been to 2 sanctionals. You went to Filthy 150 in Ireland, 3
weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay. And then you were at Pandaland, which is the best CrossFit sanctions name ever, this last weekend. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about those 2 competitions?
I'm really proud of how we did at both. It's the 3rd sanctional we did, because we did CrossFit Sid last year as well. So we've, as a squad, as a team, we've done 3 sanctionals, and we podiumed at all 3, which is pretty cool. You know, considering the level of the athletes that we're up against, and what's on the line. You know, like, it's not a Mickey Mouse competition. You know, you're losing to, I say we're losing, come second in 2 and third, technically third in 1, and we're losing to, you know, international super teams, which is a it's tough because, when you're that close, you want to get that ticket, you want to get that prize, but you can't be outcome based. You can only look at the actual performance and be honest and objective about that. And I think honestly, certainly in Strength and Depth Plan in Filthy 150, we outperformed what anyone other than us thought we were capable of. And I personally was a little bit disappointed in Pandaland with my own performance. I feel like I probably potentially cost us that ticket myself.
I'm pretty certain the other three guys on your team won't agree with you, but yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, I think like the way that is, it's just the programming at Pandaland was very, very different to the other two sanctionals. As much as it was a team event, it was very much individuals being tested within that group. There wasn't much teamwork.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I pride myself on in terms of organization and I guess sort of captaincy, strategy, that side of things.
Yeah.
I'm good at that, but I'm not the fittest. I'm not the strongest. I'm just okay. So, but I can perform well in that environment, and have done. And I think to hit 3 podiums in 3 sanctionals, I think is a really cool achievement, especially considering they're totally different teams that have beaten us, and we're competing against, multiple games athletes, individuals and team athletes. And the coolest thing for me was at Filthy 150 was that they invited teams to that event that were these super teams that people were expecting to come and wipe the floor with everyone, and we beat them, which was cool.
What's the plan now?
Good question. We have qualified for CrossFit Sid. We have qualified for Norway. We've qualified for West Coast Classic and for Madrid, because they all used the Open, so we entered those anyway. Yeah. The truth is we're all a bit knackered after three tough weeks and a tough Open. So I think we're going to have a chat this weekend and see what everyone feels like doing, because I think the most important thing is that what we do is not easy, and certainly to be pushing for that top spot or podium spots it's a fucking tough job, and it takes a lot out of you. And I do not want to be the person that pushes people beyond what they want to do. So I want my squad to turn around and say, yeah, let's go for this and let's do it. And then I'll happily lead them. But what I don't want to do is push them to it and it end up being something they don't enjoy or they don't want to do. Like, the biggest thing for me is that we compete. We train really, really hard, and we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations every day so that we can go to competitions and enjoy ourselves. And as soon as you go to a competition and you don't enjoy it, I think you need to take a little bit of a step back and understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Are you funding yourselves to go to all these events as well?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be able to secure some sponsorship this season through a couple of my own individual contacts. So I managed to get us enough sponsorship to fund us for the Filthy 150 trip, and luckily we won $6,000 at Filthy 150, which helped. Although we haven't received it then, but that'll help fund the next one and so on and so forth. But yeah, I've personally funded a lot of this as well, because the biggest thing that I wanted to do as well, and what Carl believes in, Carl's not in a position where he's been able to help us as much financially as I'm sure he would have liked to. But I personally think that the big thing that what we're trying to do with the athlete program and what we believe in is that we want to give people the opportunity to have these experiences and not be out of pocket for them. I was lucky enough to play professional sports for a couple of years, and you didn't have to buy your kit. You didn't have to pay for your travel. You didn't have to, pay for your hotels and your accommodation. And people sort of take that for granted. Go into these sanctional events. It's not cheap. China cost over $5,000 in total. It's a lot of money. Yeah. Ireland cost over $4,000. It's a lot of money to get us out to these places, to get accommodation for training camps and kit and all the other stuff. And if you're asking somebody to to front up £1,000 for a weekend, on the, to potentially roll a dice when you don't know what the program is going to be or who's going to show up.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing to do. So, is it
Not to
sustainable?
mention
I
it's
don't know.
Christmas. Not to mention CrossFit is developing a habit of inviting, what's the word I'm looking for? Wild cards to events to promote because they're looking at it from their own agenda, and there's like a lot of individual components, such as every team, every individual within that team, every individual family behind that individual that supports that person. It's hard. I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think like that's something that we're looking to grow and develop within the program itself, because we want to give our athletes the opportunity to express themselves without it costing them an arm and a leg. And something that I'm very passionate about, and something that I brought in to the forefront with Carl, and he's been very, very receptive of that, and very very enthusiastic about the whole thing, and he's taking the bull by the horns a little bit, in terms of, we want to be able to eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later, look after our athletes, and we want to be able to give them bonuses for going for qualifying for these competitions or getting podiums at these competitions. And it'd be a great situation in 5 years' time, if people can make a living doing this, and that we want to help with that.
It was part of CrossFit's mindset, wasn't it? I think, to give athletes more opportunities. All you got to do is look at, I don't know how much somebody, like, there's been up to now, I think, one event of the Dubai champs, swim, and I don't know how much somebody won for that, but it's not cheap.
It's $3,000. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's not a small change, is it? And then look what they did last year, and etc. 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 I mean, Matt Fraser's apparently confirmed for Sid now.
Yeah,
cool. Like, he isn't coming to Sid for nothing, is he? Do you know what I mean? When he can go where he wants and do what he likes within CrossFit to a certain extent now. So that's really cool. Hopefully you guys will definitely be able to do that. In terms of you, and I know that you're going to be a guy that will understand that you can only control what you can control. From
absolutely, yeah.
Number one, your perspective as an athlete within that team. Number two, your perspective as the leader and the coach of that team, but then also the leader and the coach of the athlete program. I reckon you probably believe in there's only 3 ways to lead: by example, by example, by example. I always ask people towards the end of a podcast, like, 1, what do you do personally that you value most to look after yourself, like physically? 2, same question mentally. 3, same question overall. Like, what are you doing consistently, do you think, to inspire your teammates?
I guess I'm just, like you said, I'm trying to lead by example. I'd like to think that I would never ask any of my athletes to do something that I wouldn't do myself, or wouldn't try to do myself. I ask them to do things all the time that I can't do, but I would love to be able to do. I think it's, I try to keep myself in as good physical shape as I possibly can. And that's not necessarily because I know a lot of coaches that are great coaches that have never been great athletes, or are no longer great athletes. I don't believe that you have to be able to walk the walk to talk the talk. I think
Alex Ferguson wasn't the best footballer on the planet.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean? I think neither was Jose Mourinho. He was an average footballer and went into management early, and the same sort of thing. It's like, if you're good enough, you're good enough. But I personally think, from certainly leading a team, obviously I need to be fit. I need to be fit enough to not let that team down. But I also need to have the belief of the guys that if I'm telling them we're going to do something, then you better believe I'm going to be at the front of it, dragging us along and making sure we get there. Because I don't want to be the guy that's all smoke and no fire.
Where's that mindset come from, do you think? Like, you've obviously been always consistently, it sounds like to me, trying to push yourself to the top of anything that you've done. And if you haven't done it, it doesn't sound like it's through lack of effort, enthusiasm, commitment, determination, and so on. Like, what makes you like that?
I think it's probably my upbringing. I think mum and dad were both very sporty, both very competitive. My mum swam for Wales, played lacrosse for Wales. My dad was a sprinter for Wales, played first class rugby. And we'd come to blows over Monopoly. Like, it was like everyone wanted to win everything at any point in our house. It didn't matter what it was. And I think that's in me. I think
Who normally won Monopoly, though? That's the important question.
Obviously me, I don't lose, except for sanctionals at the moment. No, I think the big thing is that my dad came from very little and worked very, very hard to get to a point where he's done incredibly well for himself. And I think he was very keen when I was being brought up to not give me anything. I had to work for everything. And he was very keen to make sure that I understood the value of hard work in everything that I did. And I hope I'm doing that. I think that the big thing that I want to do is repay people's faith in me. They're putting in me, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I possibly can in anything that I do. I think if they say that the way that you do anything is the way that you do everything, and if I've got the opportunity to do something, and I'm in a very privileged position that I've got the chance to go to these sanctionals, or I've got the chance to coach these athletes, or I've got the chance to run these businesses, or to own these gyms, that I want to do the best that I possibly can with that opportunity I've been given.
How do you stay level-headed through it all? Like, how do you stay sane with all the responsibility and the physical demands, the mental demands, all of that?
I'd be lying if I said I haven't struggled in the past with things. And there are times where things get difficult. The same with everyone. I think it's a matter of trying to find a balance. And I'm lucky that I've got a really good support system around me in terms of my friends, my family, my girlfriend. And I think that if ever I got too big for my boots, it wouldn't take long for one of them to turn around and tell me I'm being a bit of a tit. And I think that's important. I think I'd be disappointed if they didn't. I think if I'd like to think that I try my very best to be as level-headed and humble as I can be through everything that I do, because I know I've nowhere near got it all figured out, and I think that I'm a little bit of a train wreck at times as well. And I think that it's pretty important that if you think that you've got it all figured out, you need to take a step back and realize how far you are away from where you want to be.
That's very true. So what's cracking off with you over the next kind of, we're basically Christmas. What's the new year look like for you, for the athlete program, for your other businesses? What kind of stands out as keeping you busy and excited? What's going on?
I'm looking forward to having a little bit of downtime over Christmas in terms of, no competitions on the immediate horizon. We've got Sid in 6 weeks' time, and I've got a feeling that we're probably going to, or I'm personally probably not going to compete in that, and potentially look at doing another one maybe a little bit later on. But for me, it's nice to just spend a bit of time with the family, regroup a little bit, and I'm looking forward to actually getting some training done. The last 10 weeks has been very much with the Open and with I did 3 competitions because we competed at Sid as well with the box. Has been very, very sporadic in terms of training, and I'm looking forward to just rebuilding and getting back in shape from a personal point of view. From the business point of view, the gym is going incredibly well. And
which gym is this?
Ion, right here. Ion Strength Conditioning in Cardiff.
Where Cardiff, yeah.
Yeah. And it's going great. We've got a great buzz there at the moment, and a great team. A lot of really cool things happening there. And New Year is going to be a busy time for that. So just making sure that we stay on top of that and don't drop the ball and keep things growing the way that it's growing. The athlete program, I just want to keep doing the best I can for the guys. So my individual athletes, looking after them and making sure that I'm not letting them down, and they're getting the best out of me. And from the program itself, the generic program, making sure that we're putting out as much quality as we possibly can, and that the guys that are following that are feeling like they're getting good value for money. That's the cool. We got Kratos as well. The nutrition side of things is relaunching and coming back in the new year, which is a really exciting thing for me, having had a bit of a hiatus for a couple of years while I've been setting things up with the program and with the business. So I'm really excited about getting that back out on the market too.
So you've got a lot of places that I think people can look to keep up with you moving forwards if they enjoy the show together. You're on Instagram. You're at
Mike Kratos. Kratos. Yeah.
The gym is Ion on Instagram.
Yeah, Ion_Cardiff.
Athlete program.
The athlete program.
And then moving forwards into the new year, then when the nutrition gets promoted, where can people keep their eyes open for that?
Kratos-nutrition.co.uk, and it's at Kratos_nutrition on Instagram.
Yeah, just a full-time job trying to keep up with all those Instagram accounts, mate.
Yeah, no shit. It's why have one job when you could have 15?
Exactly. Well, Mike, you are the man for taking this time out to talk to me today. I really appreciate it. Let's hope there are calls for a second one when you are headed to the CrossFit Games.
Mate, fingers crossed. Thanks very much for having me, and thanks for everything you're doing, mate. It's good.
Oh, thank you. This is Dan Ball from Wellness Academy. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. You'll find a link on the episode notes. Just tap or swipe over the cover art. You'll also see some offers from our sponsor, Lichfield Apart Hotel. Find them at lichfieldaparthotel.com, and we hope you'll support our show by supporting them. If you like what you've heard, we'd love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe. Another way to support us is to answer a short survey at yourwellnessacademy.co.uk/survey and tell us what wellness topics you'd like to hear about. I'm your host, Dan Ball. Our producer is Scott Towns, created by our executive producer, Ben Heathcote for Wellness Academy.